Okay, so welcome to UTA. I am Paul Wouters, the responsible AD for this group. I'm just sitting here in case we had no physical body to press slides. But since during this week, Alan de Kock has graciously decided to be a co-chair of this working group, we do actually have a hot body here sitting next to me as well. But I want to stress that all the hard work of getting this meeting organized and done is actually done by Valerie, who's been like a long time serving chair of this working group. And so all the credit goes to him. We're just the pretty faces in the front of the room. So with this, I will give the floor to Valerie to lead this meeting.
So hello, everybody. It's a using TLS and application working group session. It's the last session of this IETF. So perhaps everyone get tired, but we need to concentrate to make this last session. We have a pretty loose agenda, but first of all, I want to say okay. So note well, you should remember that this session is being recorded, and all your contribution is the subject of IETF intellectual property rights. So just read this again. And ISG reminds co-chair to remind participants about code of conduct of IETF. And so we have some change in our leadership, in our personal data that Paul already announced. And so first, UTA is now in the security area instead of the art. We have been moved to the security area, and so we've changed. The responsible ID was changed for us. Paul is now our responsible ID instead of Francesca, and many thanks to Francesca, who made a great job leading this group, and I personally very thankful to her for her help with chairing of this group. And we also have changes in chairs. Ori has been selected a new art ID, so he stepped down as a co-chair of this group thanks to Ori, and it was a great experience to work with him. He was very active and do all the jobs and take on himself all the tasks, and just told me, I will do it, I will try to do it. It was amazing. And Alan agreed to serve as a new co-chair and stepped up. Thank you, Alan, for this effort. I think we will have a great pleasure to work with you. At least for me, it's for sure. So a few links. So a link to the slides for this session, a link to Miteka, but if you are remote, you already know, you already got this link, and for notes and for Zulip. So we need to perform some administrative tasks. First, blue sheets are collected automatically, but we need volunteers for taking notes and for scribing. I personally think that we don't need Zulip scribe because chat is not actually active. And for example, I can monitor the chat and translate it in case somebody doesn't have a full connection to the Miteko. But we still need to volunteers for taking notes. So Alan and Paul, can you see some volunteers? Because for me, it's
Jan Fred has volunteered, and I will
okay.
set this back up.
Okay, thank you, Jan Fred. So we have a fairly loose agenda for this session. We have two presentations. And first presentation is Rich Size, and he okay. So Rich, go ahead.
Okay, this is a draft. I think it's been discussed on the mailing list. So presenting an update next. The content of the draft, there's some, typical IETF boilerplate, both front matter, back matter. A couple paragraphs on the security comparisons of TLS 1.2 and 1.3. The primary point being, yeah, if you're really careful, you can make TLS 1.2 almost as good as TLS 1.3 in terms of security. And then the main point of the draft, new protocols must use TLS 1.3. The idea being new protocols, things that are just now being defined. To give you a scope of the size, I write it in Markdown, including, a lot of the boilerplate doesn't show up, so it's, 274 lines, not a lot. Next slide, please. One of the big motivations is that people are worried about, post-quantum or quantum relevant cryptographically relevant quantum computer. And shorthand is, when can I get, post-quantum crypto? So we want to say, nope, we're working on it. It will not appear in TLS 1.2, and that the intent of this draft is to help encourage new development of 1.3 and later, or new applications using 1.3, because experiments are already being done. And so just to help add another voice to the chorus. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we're looking for would like to be adopted by the working group. There's some nits known to be fixed that have to be fixed. For example, it's not aligned with being a best common practice draft. It updates an existing BCP doc. So there's some other minor wording changes, inelegant phraseology, stuff like that. It's probably got a short review, one of these by the premise, by the flick kind of deals. And then hopefully working group last call, probably, 2 IETF sessions. Yeah, Valerie.
So my question is, speaking as participant, so my question is that your main idea is to strengthen the recommendation from RFC 9325 to that currently TLS 1.3 should be adopted, as far as I remember. Should be used, should be supported by application protocol. And you want to strengthen it that it must be supported.
Yeah, I believe it says 1.2 is a must and 1.3 is a should.
Yes. And
Right.
what about 1.2? Both must be supported, or do you want to change some words about 1.22?
Yeah, that, I would leave, my personal impression would be to sort of flip those. So 1.3 is a must, 1.2 is a may if you have deployment concerns. I would make it a may, not a should for 1.2.
Okay. I just think that it should be discussed in the working group. These words were very carefully selected, and I remember, if you remember, there was a long discussion among the authors of RFC 9325, what should be should, what should be must, and okay, I just think that it should be discussed very carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. The key point is that it doesn't actually change 9325 for existing protocols. It's for things that are starting now, is the intent of this draft. But yeah, it absolutely has to be discussed, and it should be an explicit consensus in the group for what those words should be. But 1.3 is, as a must, is definite.
Sorry, just a clarification question. When you say new protocols, I guess you mean new applications, right?
No, well, Yeah, so, right, there's mentioned that there's some wording changes. That would be one of the clarifications, right? You know, a new protocol that is using SMTP, or a new application using SMTP, I wasn't particularly commenting on that. I was thinking more along the lines of a brand new protocol. But yes, given this group's charter and stuff, again, would be something we'd have to discuss.
Thiru, Nokia, it was easy for us to migrate to like test TLS 1.3, right? With hybrid schemes and signature algorithms, we could enhance OpenSSL and other TLS libraries, but we're still facing challenges with GTLS, right? So what is the stance on DTLS? Because we have not even started figuring out a transition path from DTLS 1.2, 1.3. So I think that some insights on that would be helpful.
Yeah, this document says this does not apply to DTLS. Sorry. You know, it's, yes.
But we should figure out a path for that as well, right? I mean, especially in 3GPP, we use DTLS in several places, and we're struggling, especially because we can't do that with DTLS 1.2, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So this is sort of a companion document to one that's in TLS working group, which points out, you know, TLS is not 1.2. It's not, doesn't say deprecated. It doesn't use any of those charged words, but it says, you know, TLS 1.2 is frozen. We're not going to do any more work on it. This doesn't apply to DTLS. And the primary reason is because DTLS 1.3 deployment isn't widely available yet. Because OpenSSL thinks quick is more important, I guess. I don't know. But at any rate, that was a big concern, is people were pointing out when we were discussing the companion draft. It's not, DTLS 1.3 is not widely available. And so it doesn't make sense to try to force the industry onto 1.3 yet. Mr. H. Yeah.
Am I in front of the queue?
Yeah, you are, as
Okay.
far as I know.
Hi, Jonathan Hoyland, Cloudflare. Maybe a nit or an editorial, but I was just looking through the draft and it says must default to TLS 1.3. Could it be must default to TLS 1.3 or higher?
Sure.
Because otherwise we're going to get to the point where we have 1.4 and people are like, no, must not use that.
Absolutely, yeah. So that, like I said, inelegant words are in there, but yes.
Yes, editorial comment.
Yeah, no, ping me, GitHub, pull request, whatever. Yes,
Will do.
that should be fixed. Jim?
Sorry about that, Jim Fenton. I'm a little bit confused, and maybe it's just my misunderstanding, but what is meant by it needs to default to 1.3? If you have like a web server or something like that that supports 1.3 and 1.2, and it's kind of up to the client and that sort of thing, I'm not clear on what the meaning of the word default is here.
Yeah, another editorial change. It should, if both sides are capable of 1.3, they should use it. You should, yeah.
So maybe prefer 1.3 or something like that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that wasn't what I thought this meant at all. I thought you meant this must offer, if you're deploying a new service, you must offer 1.3.
Yes.
Like, which is not the same as if the client offers you 1.3 and you support it, you don't downgrade to 1.2 for no reason. Right? Those are very different statements.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I didn't think it through clearly. We'll have to fix it on the list. Yes, that's a really good point. And it's kind of subtle one.
So this is Alan. We had similar issues with EAP TLS and TLS 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. The way we ended up solving that was systems should be configured to use TLS 1.3 by default when they ship, and the only way to use lower versions is manual configuration.
That seems reasonable. Yeah. So to mention to talk to Paul's point earlier, I think it's still in this draft. The DNS protocols, DNS over TLS, say 1.2 is a must, 1.3 is a may, because they have a deployed base. Quick says TLS 1.3 only, and it says nothing before 1.3. So that's, is the application the protocol? Is it the server? Is it the client? We'll have to figure that out. Okay, so maybe short review is a little optimistic.
David?
Oh, now it's going to be a long review.
David, David Benjamin. So I think probably the way to think about this is what do you set your minimum version to? Because that's the knob that most libraries have. I interpreted at least the title of the draft to mean you want new protocols to set min version equal TLS 1.3 by default, which I think is what we want for new protocols, because if it's new, there's no pre-existing deployment base to be worried about. So maybe we should just phrase it that way, and then we don't have to, or higher. And then it's sort of clear what we're trying to say.
Right. Yeah. So I think I've said yes to 3 different approaches to the same thing, but yes.
And I will add, I am extremely supportive of setting the minimum version to TLS 1.3 and up for new protocols.
Right. And leaving the max unspecified. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so we'll continue. Well, we'll issue an adoption call, and I have a one process-wise question to Paul. If this document got adopted and become an RFC, then will it be a part of BCP 195 because it updates RFC 9325? So Paul, would probably
This updates 9325. Would it be a part of BCP 195?
Yes, if it updates, it becomes part of the BCP.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
So,
thank you.
John, do you have something?
Hi.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering how is this going to get enforced? Because I recall, and I don't remember which session it was earlier this week, but someone was doing a protocol design or something, and it had TLS 1.2 on it, right? And I forget which session it was. It was Monday or Tuesday. I'm here in Canada, so the hours are all mixed up. So, but anyway, I'm just wondering how, so you write this in this document, people, I guess, will write a protocol, and if they have 1.2 in it or they need it, you'll just say, oh, no, you can't do this anymore. I guess, how's it enforced? Just because it's written down?
I have my official protocol police badge here, and
Okay.
Yeah, we can't enforce it. It's just guidance to the industry.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next presentation. Tiru, please go ahead.
You can try. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure because the chair is remote, so hopefully it will work. Because they have to be in the exact window. So
Yeah, no
easier
problem.
for the other two.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Thiru from Nokia. I'll be talking about PQC recommendations for internet applications. This work, in fact, started when we were evaluating 3GP systems to migrate to use PQC, and we were basically evaluating several algorithms that are being finalized by NIST, trying to see the security properties and then the performance impact that it would have on 3GPP systems. So as part of that, we realized an entire ecosystem has to change because of this. And then I started realizing probably it's good to put some of the evaluations that we're doing in a draft so that we can bring it to IETF attention and see if you're missing anything. Next slide, please. Yeah, without going into too much details, I think we are all pretty aware that the Shor's algorithm proves that existing asymmetric crypto will be broken. I'm not going to talk about symmetric crypto because there is Grover's algorithm, and there are some SDOs, at least in 3GPP, which talk about migrating from 128 to 256, but it seems like uh, I don't see immediate need for that, but at least some of the 3GPP SDOs are recommending to migrate to 256-bit. Next slide. Yeah, so we have now 4 finalists, 1 for KEM and 3 digital signatures. And there are several other digital signature schemes that are being evaluated because of some of the limitations with the existing digital signature schemes that are there. Next slide. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do in this draft is discuss the quantum-ready usage profiles for applications using TLS to defend against both passive and on-path attacks employing cryptographically relevant quantum computers. Next slide. Yeah, so I divided the scope of this draft into two primary sections. One is the data confidentiality part, and then the authentication part. Data confidentiality part plays a paramount role, especially for attackers who are basically passively snooping into the traffic and recording all the TLS traffic of interest, let's say, for sensitive traffic, recording that, and prior one day when CRQs become relevant, they could use to decrypt this data and use that for various malicious purposes, right? So data confidentiality is an immediate threat that we are realizing that we have to upgrade our systems in case if attackers may be already wiretapping and basically recording all of the TLS session data. Next slide. Yeah, as part of our evaluation, we have basically, I think the algorithm names have been upgraded. So, we have evaluated Kyber, Bike, and HQC. We had some issues with classic McLaren's. We couldn't do that. And we could evaluate Dilithium, Falcon, and Spinix as well as part of our performance benchmarking. Next slide. Yeah, so the most important aspect with regard to TLS, like my previous presenter was talking, that we have to first migrate to TLS 1.3, right? In case if you want to support PQ algorithms, either the pure ones or the hybrid ones. There's discussion happening in TLS working group. Hybrid scheme is a working group document. I think it's progressing pretty well. We could implement that and basically test our test it in our labs. We haven't tried the pure one yet. So in that draft, it's basically the client basically offers a concatenation of both the traditional and the PQ chems, and the server offers the ciphertext, and it's part of the public key. It only offers hybrid confidentiality, which is a hybrid scheme. It's fairly mature. We could test that out. Client can cache the server's preference for key exchanges for future TLS interactions with the server. We have also seen several deployments with regard to from Chrome, Cloudflare, and we have open source implementations already available. So this was quite straightforward for us to experiment and evaluate the performance benchmarking. So this seems like a natural way that applications can start integrating the hybrid key exchange in their TLS profiles to start migration. Next slide. Yeah, this was something that we found interesting, especially when we were evaluating with different MTUs and trying to see with middle boxes and what kind of challenges that we are facing. What we realized is that if you send both the traditional and hybrid key exchange algorithms, because the PQ chems have a much larger key sizes compared to the traditional ones, there could be scenarios where your size of the hybrid key exchange algorithm could exceed the MTU. And similarly, the server hello response would also have the traditional public key and the PQChem ciphertext, in which case that would also exceed the MTU, and it would run across multiple packets because of the fragmentation. The alternative, I think that's the deployment that we were preferring to do basically in our deployments, irrespective that we could cater to more packet sizes rather than a failure scenario. Right. The second one is about indicating the support for hybrid key exchange, where the client only offers the traditional crypto key share for the traditional algorithm and says it supports the PQ, the hybrid scheme. and then the server could respond with an hello retry request, which is an error message, so that the client knows that the server supports it, and the client can now retry the client hello with the PQCam plus the traditional algorithm, which is the hybrid scheme. Uh, this seems like a more like an overhead with regard to than the first approach. And at least in our deployments, we are planning to leverage the first one. But I've seen like Cloudflare and others have reported that, especially with age-old middle boxes or middle boxes which haven't upgraded, they may have issues with the first scheme where they see the client hello being fragmented across multiple packets, and they see it as an anomaly and basically drop the packets. Right. So I think it seems like unless those boxes get upgraded, the first approach may not be deployable in all the scenarios. And the other recommendation would be to avoid duplication of the PQCam public keys in the client hello. There's an interesting draft which defines in the DNS SVCB record, the server could provide the key share preferences in DNS responses. I think that seems like an easy way for the client to pick the key shares, right, to avoid the limitations that we are facing with both approach 1 and approach 2. I think there's a good amount of discussion in this draft, and that seems like if that draft gets adapted, that could be something that applications can leverage to avoid the problems that we're currently facing with both the approaches 1 and 2. Next slide. Yeah, coming to authentication, right? I mean, in our applications, we use both PKI and internal CAs, right? And so we were evaluating primarily dilithium and the other one, but Falcon had some challenges with regard to the computation on floating point computation, and it may not run on commodity hardware. So, and I see several working groups only progressing on the other two signature schemes and not doing any progress on the later one. So it helps protect against on-path attacker, which may happen much later in the phase. It doesn't seem like an immediate threat. LAMP's working group has already standardized the X.5.10 certificate using dilithium, which seems like a way forward, at least to deploy and test the authentication piece. There's a lot of discussions happening in several working groups on PQT hybrid schemes, PQT hybrid protocol, where it's a combination of both the traditional signature algorithm and the PQ signature algorithms. As part of an analysis, I think the frequency and duration of system upgrades, right, and the time when these CRQCs will be widely available needs to be weighed in for various deployments to determine when and whether there is need for support for PQT hybrid scheme. I see good discussions happening in LAMP's working group to use PQT hybrid certificate. I think the working group recently concluded on using the composite signature scheme, which is probably a way forward for at least some of the deployments that we are envisioning. Next slide. Yeah, I was just talking about the composite signature scheme, which is what NIST defines as a dual signature scheme, which uses two different algorithms, and that's the draft that was discussed, and there was a good support for progressing that. We are ready to evaluate which of the combinations that were discussed in that working group would fit in some of our environments, but that seemed like a good path forward. There's several other documents that I found interesting. I'm just mentioning that for everyone's sake to see if I don't know if any of these would get progressed, but it's all, these drafts talk about dual certificates, basically, where the primary certificate has a link to the new certificate, and in TLS handshake exchange, you could exchange both of these certs to validate the identity of the peer with the traditional as well as the PQCM certificates. Next slide. There's another draft which talks about deriving the other certificate from the base certificate, which has just a diff of the other certificate, which seemed like a nice way of doing it. I don't know if that draft is going to progress, but if it progresses, it seemed like a nice way that you could just give one certificate, and the entity who's validating the cert could derive both the certs and do the validation. Next slide. Yeah, and then informing PQC security compatibility issues, especially in some of our environments, we could see that, especially if we use service-based architecture. So in that case, if you see one of the PS is not using that, we could raise an insufficient security alert so that it goes back to the administrator who's managing the systems and take some remediation action. Servers could also inform the users if they see that the clients could inform the users in case if they see the servers do not support PQC or hybrid key exchange as we go forward. Next slide. Yeah, then the draft goes into some of the various application protocols that we see are pretty much relying on TLS. I mean, it's a huge list. I started with some of the ones that I pretty much am engaged with. I'm pretty sure there's several other protocols, but this is just given as pointers to see that encrypted DNS, hybrid public key encryption, which is predominantly used by several other protocols, WebRTC, which uses TTLS, and we are planning to use TTLS as well for securing SCTP. That's used in 3GPP and HTTPS, which pretty much carries a lot of sensitive data. Next slide. Yeah, and then the post-quantum algorithms that are a lot of have added several details in the security considerations on how they're relatively new and are going through a lot of scrutiny, but not at the same level that the traditional algorithms have already gone through. But I think, for instance, Kyber has been around for around 7 years and it's gone through several evaluations. So there seems to be some confidence in some of the deployments that we could do migrate from hybrids to pure PQ in some networks where CNSA 2.0 is mandating that. And for regulatory compliances, we have to probably do in certain deployments hybrid schemes. So hybrid key exchange seems like an initial way forward to address the harvest now and decrypt later attack while not fully abandoning traditional crypto systems. But eventually, when CRQCs come, you will definitely have to abandon them. Next slide. Yeah, I mean, this is just this 0.2 version of the draft. There's a lot of work to do. I'm looking for more collaborators and see if the working group can adapt it, and looking for more comments and suggestions on this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you, Tiro, for this work that you're doing. I just had a couple comments because you referenced a bunch of documents that I'm an author on, which was nice to see. Yeah, so the discovery draft that you mentioned. What's that? Sorry?
I'm following all the work that you guys are doing. So
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad. Yeah, and if you want help with this, I'm happy to help you as well. Just you showed the discovery draft, so I just wanted to mention. So we are planning to present that one in July in Vancouver. Yeah, we did publish it like I think a few months ago. It was supposed to actually be done at the last IETF, but we ran out of time at the LAMPS group, and then yeah, this time we just thought we would. With all the other discussions going on, we thought we'd wait till July for that. So there's that. And the other thing is you mentioned the dilithium. It sounded like you said it was standardized, but it can't be standardized yet, right? Because MLDSA is not finalized, but I think it's basically done. It's just like in placeholder form that they're waiting for the final to be public, and then that should go ahead. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, thank you for putting this together. It's very useful, I think.
Hi, Ben, UK, NCSC. I confess I haven't read the draft in full. I've kind of given it a read through now, but on a first read, it seems like there's quite a lot of stuff in there that isn't actually relating to TLS. It's kind of more HPK generally and so on. And that makes you wonder whether this working group is the right one. There might be one more for the chairs, I don't know. Potentially, if not, then you might be able to bring it to something like PQIP and expand out the use cases and say, here's all the other ones. Or you could potentially narrow the scope and say, here's where it's useful for TLS.
Right. So the reason why the draft also references HPK is, for instance, for TLS, right? TLS uses the hybrid scheme, but it also uses HPK for encrypting client hello. So it would be incomplete if we didn't just talked about TLS without talking about encrypted client hello. That was the reason why we had to add the HPK key one, right? Beyond that, there was no need to add that.
Yeah, okay. And I think it's definitely worth including the HPKA context specifically for the TLS stuff, but it goes on a bit of a broader discussion. And if it's more useful to have that broader discussion, it might be better for a broader working group.
Sure.
Just a thought.
Yeah, makes sense.
Palvo, just an individual. Yeah, I also am wondering if UTA is the best match for this document, because like mostly I think the things discussed is like use TLS 1.3 wisely, which is kind of, if we have Bridges document that basically tells us to do that, then what is left to specifically for applications to take into consideration when using TLS 1.3 with the standard post-quantum protections that the TLS working group decides on?
Right. So at least if you see for the TLS 1.3, right, I mean, the various ways that you could exchange the key shares that we tested and found there are different ways to do that. The hybrid scheme doesn't say how these approaches can be used. So I thought it depends on your deployment model that you could choose either to send both the key shares or just one of them and try a retry approach, right? So this is all deployment and application specific. The hybrid scheme doesn't specify those, right? So just one example, basically.
But I think like whether you want to do hybrid or pure is something that's sort of out of scope, right? I think you like.
No, I was not referring to the hybrid or pure. I was saying there are multiple approaches in a way that the hybrid scheme itself, the cryptographic algorithms could be shared with the server, right? Either you could just say, I support it and don't provide the key share, and then the server throws an error and then you provide that. Or there are alternate approaches where you could send both of them, right? And it results in multiple round trips versus additional compute, right? So the TLS document doesn't specify that. So it's up to the implementation which decides what to do, right? So that's just one example where I felt like some guidance would be helpful, but there could be other scenarios as well. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe some of these issues are also worth bringing back to TLS and saying like it's unclear how to do things. But I agree that the line's a little in between. Yeah, thanks.
Hello again, it's John. Great from Interest. Yeah, I was just going to mention. Yeah, it might. I haven't read this document. I didn't realize this until I seen this. In fact, I wasn't sure I was even going to stay up this late. But then after seeing your presentation, I'm definitely going to take a look at it. And I wonder too, I mean, a lot of what you had at least presented does seem like you're talking about what's going on in other groups. And I know like in the PQIP working group, for instance, we do have like a use cases draft that I mean, you were talking a lot about use cases and different kind of mechanisms and stuff, right? And perhaps maybe there's some kind of collaboration there. Maybe anyway. So I'm going to take an action to definitely read your document, and maybe I'll send you an email or something to her, and maybe there's some collaboration room there or whatever. But I just think, yeah,
that makes sense. Probably we can present that in PQ and see what can be done more.
Okay, thanks.
David Benjamin. Yeah, so I think at the level of like guidance on how to use TLS in Utah, like I think it's a little premature in that all of the documents that you cite here are like in varying degrees of not yet existing. So for instance, right, the TLS draft may not actually currently talk about guidance on key shares, but maybe we should just put it in there. And maybe if it turns out that like, you know, there's some overarching guidance that doesn't fit in there, then it might make sense to have like a Utah level draft on like, here's how you do like, here's like the various choices you can make around key shares. But I think the sort of inputs to those decisions haven't yet been set yet. So I don't know if we want to quite be doing that. And that's just on the like key share side, sorry, on the chems side. On the certificate stuff, things are even more in the air. Like there are no mechanisms defined at all right now for using post-quantum keys as the authentication keys in TLS. And like some of the drafts I saw you mentioned, or like this is a great survey of like a lot of the interesting work happening, but I suspect a lot of them are not going to end up making sense in TLS. Like I haven't seen a use case in TLS for the like chameleon stuff. It's probably useful in like other kinds of applications, but probably not TLS where we already have a negotiation scheme. So I think probably like the I suspect we will get to a point sooner for key share for the chem bits than the signature bits for knowing what we need to provide guidance on in the first place. But we're not even there for the key shares bits. So like probably like in terms of an actual working group document, maybe this needs to be sort of like divided up into pieces and figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, still a lot of work is in progress, so this will keep evolving as it goes by. And,
Yeah, I was going to respond to David there. And you mentioned the chameleon draft in TLS. So yes, there hasn't been discussion per se with TLS, but there are use cases there that could make a lot of sense with TLS, especially like the way the structure works. It could work really well for backwards compatibility. So that, I mean, there probably are discussions that need to happen and probably should happen. So yeah, those things just need to happen, and I guess it just needs to happen. So I don't know what to say. Well, again, we'll have to talk.
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, at least for us, right, in 3GPP, we use both the public CAs and internal CAs as well, right? So for us, in some deployments, migration is quite easy, right? I mean, we basically provision all the network functions ourselves, right? And we can provision the root CAs, and we don't have any intermediate CAs. So it makes sense for us to do the enhanced authentication. Seems much more easy than the web VK world will do it. I'm pretty sure it may be applicable in industrial IoT and other enterprises use cases for managed devices, right? So based on my past experience, so I thought, yeah, I mean, for applications which use probably the public CA, it may not make sense so immediately, but for other scenarios, we still have applications that run in other domains where some of these drafts or work that is happening in LAMPs is still applicable.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have some concern with the document. The main concern is that I agree with David that it's probably a bit premature to make some recommendations for applications, given the fact that the core technology in TLS and LAMPs are not settled yet. So for example, TLS working group is not yet decided whether they want to do hybrid or pure PQ, and the same is for LAMPs. So we can adopt the document, but it seems to me that it won't be finalized until all this underlying technology that in the other working groups are finalized. So perhaps it will be a long-lived draft that will be waiting for the corresponding working groups, LAMPs, TLS, at least for these two, to finalize the documents about how to use PQ stuff. So this is my concern. So it can become RFC earlier than we'll get an RFC from those working groups. So what do you think about this?
I'm more interested in like, I don't think the draft will be ready soon for becoming going anywhere near working group last call or anywhere, right? I think there's ton of work that is happening in several working groups, and it's going to be like a very long-lived working group document, even if it gets adapted, right? And I'm waiting for that eventually to then make a call. But having this document helps us to have those discussions and figure out what fits, what doesn't fit in, and what is different approaches that we could recommend. That will at least help us decide the transition path, which is still being worked out in several other STOs we are participating in, and that would give us some guidance at least.
So do you want the draft to be adopted, or do you agree to for this draft to remain as individual for some time?
I would like to get
discussed in UTA working group.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hear comments from the working group because I've not seen any comments yet. So let the comments come in. I'll address the comments, and then maybe then we can decide what to do with the draft.
Okay, I think that will please stimulate discussion in the mailing list, and we shall see what the working group thinks about the maturity of the draft, whether this is the right time to issue an adoption call and so on. Okay.
Thanks, Valerie.
So we've done with presentations, and I want, speaking as Redext co-chair, and Alan is active participant in Redext working group. I want to remind that Redext co-chair has, Jan Fred is co-author of the draft that makes a recommendation for using TLS in a radius protocol. And we badly need reviews from TLS aware experts, from the experts who are aware of how to use TLS in applications of this draft, because it is ready for last call, but we think that it gets very few reviews. So please, please, please consider reviewing this draft. I've already sent the link for this draft to the list.
Hi, this is Jan Fred. Maybe hold off on the review for maybe a week or so, because there are some changes to the document that were discussed in the Redext working group and on the mailing list. So I hope to issue a new version of that draft sometime next week. And I will be sending a mail to UTA with some specific questions or some specific sections that we would love to have a feedback on from people who understand TLS in applications probably a lot better than I do.
Paul Wouters, actually at the SAG meeting, I asked specifically for reviewers for this document, and I got the following 3 volunteers: Hannes, Sean Turner, and Dan Harkins. So please put it in the minutes and send them an email next week.
The more volunteers, the better. So perhaps we'll get more volunteers. So anyway, thank you, Paul, for raising this topic in SAG. I very appreciate it. And so we've done with the agenda, with presentations. So open mic. Any other business? Going once, going twice. Okay, I think we've done.
Sorry, John again. Yeah, I was just, sorry, I know everyone wants to leave because it's the last day. But this discussion just made me think about I actually, maybe I should just throw it on the mailing list, but because the first Rich was talking about TLS 1.2, 1.3 not supporting PQ, and it just made me think of an interesting use case for the Chameleon certificate because of its flexibility, and like the outer certificate could be PQ, but inner could be classic. So you could actually use that inner. So it's still a certificate that has PQ in it, but the inner could be non-PQ, which then could be used with a TLS 1.2 for backwards compatibility. Anyway, just an idea that came up. And I probably wouldn't. Maybe I'll just throw it on the list or something. But it was just the first time I put the two together with what was said earlier and then what Tira was talking about. So I don't know what anyone thinks about that. Maybe people think that's a dumb idea, but just thought that could be just show. I guess there's different interesting mechanisms in this whole PQ realm that could maybe even get around things that we're trying to say, don't do this or don't do that. But then, there could be these like edge things that people, if people can do it, they're going to do it. Right. So I guess that's something to consider. So anyway, that's all. So have a good night, everybody, or good morning or whatever. It's 2 a.m. here where I am. So take care.
Thank you. So
That's
I
it.
believe we've done.
Yeah, everybody's done. This was the last meeting. Go see koalas.
So have a nice trip for those who are on site, and bye bye.
Thanks for
Nice trip
sticking
to
around
home.
in the
Safe
late
trip
night
to home.
Saturday.